I was 4 months old when my parents left me on a cold kitchen floor, a bottle of formula untouched, and walked out the door forever. If you are hearing this and you love raw stories, hit the subscribe button now, because what you are about to hear will hit you harder than any courtroom drama you have ever seen. My name is Sofia Alvarez. I grew up in a crumbling 2-bedroom house on the outskirts of Cleveland. My grandmother Rosa raised me after my parents vanished. She worked 3 night shifts at the hospital, came home smelling of antiseptic, and tucked me into a worn-out couch that squeaked every time I moved. Birthdays were marked by a single cupcake and a candle that flickered in the dark. When I turned 18, a lawyer named Mr. Collins called me. He said he represented the estate of a man named Thomas Whitaker, my grandfather, a name I had never heard. He told me that Thomas had left me $3.4 million in his will. The only catch? My parents, who had abandoned me decades ago, were contesting the will, claiming they were my legal guardians and therefore entitled to the money. I sat in that sterile office, the fluorescent lights buzzing, and felt the old fear rise. The fear of being abandoned again. The fear of being powerless. My hands trembled as I clipped the pen to the notepad. "Do you have any proof of your relationship to Thomas Whitaker?" Mr. Collins asked. I shook my head. "No, I never met him." He sighed. "Then we have a problem." The court date was set. I walked out of that building with a knot in my stomach, the weight of a lifetime pressing down on me. I knew I had to fight. The first hearing was a blur of legal jargon and cold stares. My parents sat across from me, looking older than I remembered. My mother, Elaine, whispered something to my father, Mark, and they both glanced at me with a mixture of contempt and calculation. "Your Honor, we are the rightful heirs," Mark said, his voice flat. "We raised Sophia. We deserve this money." I felt a surge of anger. "You raised me? You left me on a kitchen floor." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Ms. Alvarez, please keep your emotions in check." I clenched my fists under the table. I could not let them see me break. Between hearings, I dug through old boxes in my grandmother's attic. Dust floated in the shafts of light as I lifted lids. I found birth certificates, a faded adoption paper, and a handwritten note from Rosa. "If you ever find out who you are, know that love is not a transaction." I showed the note to Mr. Collins. He looked at it, then at me. "This changes things." He explained that the adoption paper listed my parents as unknown. That meant the court could not automatically grant them custody of the estate. It was a small victory, but it felt like a lifeline. 2 weeks later, I received a call from a private investigator I had hired. "Sophia, I found something you need to see." He met me at a rundown coffee shop, slid a folder across the table, and opened it. Inside were bank statements, photographs, and a recorded conversation. The conversation was between my parents and a man I did not recognize. "If we can get the will declared invalid, we split the money 3 ways," my father said. My mother replied, "And if we get caught?" The man laughed. "You won't. I have a friend in the probate office." My heart stopped. The mid-story twist hit me like a brick. My parents were not just fighting for the money, they were planning to steal it outright, and they had an insider in the system. I stared at the recording, feeling the floor tilt. The fear I had carried for years turned into a cold, hard resolve. I went to the police with the evidence. Detective Ramirez was skeptical at first, but the recorded conversation was damning. "We need to bring them in," he said. "But you have to be prepared for what comes next." I nodded, though I had no idea what next would be. The trial resumed. The courtroom was packed. Reporters whispered, and the judge called the room to order. My parents sat stone-faced, the recording playing on a screen for everyone to hear. When the playback ended, the judge looked at my parents. "You have been charged with conspiracy to commit fraud. This court will not tolerate such behavior." My mother's eyes flickered to me. A flash of something, maybe regret, maybe hatred, I could not tell. The judge ruled in my favor, granting me full control of the estate. The $3.4 million would be transferred to a trust in my name, to be used as I saw fit. I felt a wave of relief, but it was short-lived. As the courtroom emptied, Detective Ramirez approached me. "Sophia, there's something else you should know." He handed me a photograph. It was a picture of my grandfather, Thomas Whitaker, standing with a young woman who looked exactly like me. The caption read, "Thomas and his daughter, Elaine." My breath caught. Elaine, my mother's name. The final twist slammed into me. My mother was not my mother at all. She was my aunt. My real mother had died giving birth to me. and my grandmother had hidden the truth to protect me from the family that had abandoned us. The woman I had called mom for my entire life was actually my aunt, and she had been part of a scheme with my father to claim the estate. The man in the recording was a cousin, a disgraced accountant who had offered to help them cheat the system. I stared at the photograph, feeling the ground shift beneath me. All the anger, the fear, the betrayal, it all made a sick kind of sense. The fallout was brutal. My aunt, Elaine, was arrested along with my father and the cousin. The estate was frozen pending further investigation. My lawyer told me that the trust would remain in limbo until the criminal case resolved. I lost my small marketing business. Clients fled, fearing the scandal. My apartment lease was terminated because the landlord did not want the negative publicity. I moved back into my grandmother's house, the place that had been my sanctuary, now feeling like a museum of lies. The psychological toll was heavier than any financial loss. I lay awake at night, replaying the courtroom, the recording, the photograph. I felt guilty for feeling relief that my parents were not my parents. I felt guilty for the revenge I had imagined. But I also felt a strange clarity. The revenge I had pictured, taking the money and throwing it in their faces, had turned into something else. I could not undo the past, but I could decide what to do with the future. I decided to use the money to start a foundation for abandoned children. I called it Second Chance. I used the trust funds to buy a rundown building in Cleveland and turned it into a safe haven where kids could get after-school tutoring, counseling, and a hot meal. I hired staff who had been through similar trauma because I knew what it felt like to be seen and not heard. The first child to walk through the doors was a 4-year-old named Maya, who had been left at a bus station with nothing but a stuffed rabbit. I held her hand and whispered, "You are not alone." The foundation grew. Donations poured in, not because of my name, but because of the story that had gone viral. Reporters wanted to interview me, but I declined. I did not want the spotlight. I wanted the work to speak for itself. Months later, I received a letter from the prison. It was from Elaine. She wrote, "Sophia, I am sorry. I was scared. I thought if I could get the money, I could fix the mistakes I made. I never meant to hurt you. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me." I read the letter twice, feeling nothing but a hollow ache. I folded it and placed it in a drawer with the photograph of my grandfather and his daughter. I did not write back. Abandonment leaves a scar, but it does not have to define the shape of your life. If you have ever felt abandoned, or if you have ever held onto anger like a shield, know that you can choose a different path. You can turn the pain into something that helps others. I thought the courtroom had closed the door on my past. The gavel fell, the verdict was read, and I walked out with a trust in my name and a photograph that turned my world upside down. If you are still watching, hit the subscribe button now, because what happens next will make you gasp, weep, and maybe even cheer. I stood on the courthouse steps, the cold wind slipping through my coat like a reminder that I was still alive. The photograph of Thomas Whitaker with a woman who looked exactly like me burned in my mind, Elaine, my mother's name. My aunt's face. My heart hammered, a mix of anger, fear, and a strange, hollow curiosity. I drove back to my grandmother's house, the only place that had ever felt like home. The porch lights flickered as I unlocked the front door. Inside, the familiar smell of cinnamon and old books wrapped around me. I headed straight for the attic, where Rosa kept the boxes that held the remnants of our family history. Dust motes danced in the shaft of light as I pulled down a rusted metal chest. Inside, beneath yellowed newspaper clings, I found a leather-bound journal, a sealed envelope, and a small key with a faded tag that read, "Safe Deposit, 12B. My hands shook as I opened the envelope. The letter was from Thomas Whitaker himself. He wrote that he had learned of my existence only after my mother, his daughter, died in childbirth. He had tried to reach out, but my grandmother, fearing that the Whitaker family would take me away, hid the truth. He left the estate with a condition. The heir must live in the family home for 1 year and turn it into a sanctuary for abandoned children. If the condition was not met, the entire estate would go to a distant cousin who would sell the property. My breath caught. The house I had grown up in was not just a house. It was a test, a promise, a lifeline. I slipped the key into my pocket and drove to the bank. The safe deposit box was small, but it contained something that made my stomach drop. A ledger of illegal transactions, photographs of my parents meeting with a man in a suit, and a recorded conversation between Elaine and the same man from the earlier recording. They were laundering money through a shell company called Whitaker Holdings. The mid-story twist hit me like a wave. The parents I had despised were not just greedy. They were criminals who had been siphoning money from the estate for years, using the same name that should have protected me. I knew I had to act fast. I called Detective Ramirez and told him what I had found. He asked me to bring the evidence to the station, but warned me that the people involved were dangerous. I also called Maya, a journalist I had met at a community event, and asked her to meet me at a coffee shop downtown. The plan was simple: hand over the ledger, give her the story of a lifetime, and let the police take it from there. I packed a small bag, slipped the key into my jacket, and left the house. On the way, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "We know where you are. Stop digging." My pulse spiked. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw a dark sedan tailing me. I turned onto a side street, heart pounding, and pulled into an alley. The car stopped a few blocks away, engine idling. I got out, hands trembling, and ran toward the coffee shop. I could hear footsteps behind me, echoing on the pavement. I burst through the door, breathless, and spotted Maya at a corner table. "Sophia, what's wrong?" she asked, eyes wide. I slid the ledger across the table. "They're stealing the estate. They're laundering money. I have proof." Before she could respond, the door slammed open. Two men in suits entered, their eyes locked on me. One of them pulled a gun and pointed it at my chest. "Give us the key," the taller man snarled. My mind raced. I remembered the small key in my jacket. I slipped it into my palm, feeling the cold metal against my skin. I looked at Maya, then at the gun, and made a split-second decision. "Run," I whispered to her. Maya sprinted toward the back exit. I turned and bolted toward the kitchen, knocking over tables as I went. The gun fired, a deafening crack that seemed to shake the whole building. I felt a searing pain in my side, but adrenaline kept me moving. I burst through the back door into the alley, the night air sharp against my face. I heard sirens in the distance. I kept running until my legs gave out, collapsing behind a dumpster. I lay there, clutching my side, the pain fierce, the blood soaking my shirt. I fished my phone from my pocket with shaking hands and opened the recording app. "Detective Ramirez," I whispered. "The ledger is in the safe deposit box at—" I gave him the address, then turned the phone to face the two men who had just tried to kill me. Their faces were clear in the dim light. I captured their voices as they argued about the money. I hit send, then slipped the phone into the dumpster, hoping it would survive. I lay back, the world spinning, and thought about the house, the children, the promise I had made to a man I never met. The next morning, the news exploded. Headlines read, "Local family accused of money laundering, attempted murder." The ledger, the recordings, everything was on the front page. The police arrested Elaine, Mark, and the crooked judge who had been on their payroll. The safe deposit box was seized and the illegal accounts were frozen. The final twist hit me later that afternoon. While cleaning out my grandmother's attic, I found a hidden compartment behind a bookshelf. Inside was a DVD labeled "Aus for Sophia" from Thomas. I slipped it into the old laptop and watched as Thomas Whitaker appeared on the screen. His eyes kind but weary. "My dear Sophia," he began, "if you are watching this, you have uncovered the truth. I left the estate not as a gift but as a responsibility. The house must become a sanctuary for children who, like you, have been abandoned. If you fail, the trust will go to a politician who plans to build a dam that will flood the neighborhood where your grandmother lives. I trust you to do what is right." My breath caught. The money was not just a windfall. It was a test, a shield for an entire community. The revenge I had imagined taking the money and throwing it in their faces was nothing compared to the chance to protect a whole neighborhood and honor the man who had tried to be my father. I called Maya back. "I have a story," I said, "but it's bigger than us. It's about a house, a trust, and a community that needs saving." She agreed to run the piece, but only if I would let her document the transformation of the house into a shelter. I agreed, and the cameras rolled as we broke down walls, painted rooms, and welcomed the first group of children into what would become Second Chance House. The revenge was not a single moment of vengeance. It was the systematic dismantling of a criminal network, the exposure of corruption, and the fulfillment of a promise that turned pain into purpose. My parents lost everything: their freedom, their reputation, the money they had tried to steal. The community kept their homes, and the children finally had a safe place to sleep. I stand in the hallway of the house now, the sound of laughter echoing off the freshly painted walls. A little girl with a scar on her cheek runs past me, clutching a stuffed rabbit. She looks up at me, eyes bright, and says, "Thank you." I kneel, brush a strand of hair from her face, and feel a warmth spread through my chest that I have not felt since I was 4 months old. The scar on my side still aches, a reminder of how close I came to losing everything. But the ache is softer now, a badge of survival. The weight of abandonment can crush you, but it can also become the foundation for something stronger. If you have a story like mine, if you have ever felt left on a cold kitchen floor, know that you can turn that emptiness into a place where others find belonging. Thank you for staying with me through this. If you found this story powerful, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more raw, real stories.